right, so as I was saying, I realized I had to make a little adjustment because I was focusing on level 3. I realized no, as we were going through our method, but actually, you guys aren't doing level 3. I'm guessing, right? No, is anyone doing level 3? No. Okay, so yeah, I figured. So most of you will be in level 3 or level 2. Okay, so uh, I'm just gonna try to focus on level 2 for now. Okay, now that being said, hopefully you guys were able to do the assignment number 2, which was to go through the observation steps from identify the structural units to creating an outline. So that would be here in stage 1 observation, we're still getting the context of our passage, meaning we're working on the book level. Okay, so if you think about the forest and trees analogy, we're still looking at the forest. Wala pa tayo sa tree. Okay? So you've done the reading up on the introduction to the book, first and second book reading with marking. You've thought about the purpose of the book. And now we go to this last part of observing the book. And we need to identify the structural units, write summaries, and create an outline. Okay, now we won't spend too much time here unless you guys want to, but since this is a step only for level 3, I won't take it up anymore unless you guys want me to. So we can go straight to writing summaries.
Actually, can we get a brief one? Kasi for me, when I was doing the identify versus the write summaries, kind of felt like I understood it as almost the same thing. So I don't know, like maybe level 3 is a different way. Structural units in terms of grammar, but or what, or I don't know.
Yeah, so the grammar is part of that. What I mean by the major units of the book is, for example, in Ephesians, it's three chapters. Those are the major units. So that won't be reflected just by like reading your Bible or the format of your Bible. You'd have to actually study the grammar. You'd have to look at the themes and then decide, okay, yeah, what are the big parts of that?
So that's why not necessarily by chapter.
Yeah.
So it depends on like the message and the purpose of each.
Yes, and then you look at there are lots of things. So that's a whole different discussion. But yun nga, since you guys, I want to maximize our time by focusing on what you guys really need. No? So we'll move on. If you want to know more, there is a part of the handout in the study aids on, let's see, identifying basic structural units here. So D. Now, if you want to read up a little bit on that, just to see is this something I want to try doing. Also C. No? So C and D, identifying major sections, identifying basic structural units. Okay, so, but to maximize our time, let's focus on writing summaries. Okay, so let's look at E and F, the significant parts of the handouts. I want to go through basic English grammar, which I know probably does not excite you, but
I love grammar.
but oh, good. But it's very important. It's very important, primarily for 2 reasons. Okay, number 1, it will help us determine the main idea of a paragraph and of a sentence. Also, it will help you see how the other parts of a sentence relate to the main idea. And that's very important because especially when you're working with very long sentences, which are actually not that rare in the Bible, you get some very long sentences. We can think like, okay, I'll take... So there are 3 commas, meaning there are 4 parts to this sentence. So all the 4 parts of that sentence are equally important. And that's kind of somehow the way that we treat that. But really, in one sentence, there's always a main idea. Okay, and the other parts are called modifiers. Okay, so the main idea, as you see here, let me make that bigger for you guys. Okay, the main idea is the part of the sentence that stands by itself as a complete thought. Okay, everything in the sentence other than the main idea is a modifier. So a modifier is a word or group of words that says something about another word or another group of words. So here are some examples. The sentence, Justin went home to sleep. To sleep is the modifier. How do we know that? Because I can't walk up to Gab and say, to sleep. And he'll be like, what do you mean? Right? But if I walk up to him and I told him, Justin went home, then that's a complete thought. It makes sense. Another example here shows that the main idea doesn't always begin the sentence. For example, when it rains, it pours. When it rains is the modifier. It's not a standalone thought. But it pours is a standalone thought. It could even be its own sentence. Okay, now Section F will discuss how to identify the main idea. But before we can have that discussion, there are several grammatical terms you need to understand. So, recall that the main idea conveys a complete thought and can therefore stand by itself. So, let's talk about the bare minimum for identifying the main idea. And that's important because you always want to get the bare minimum. Because you want to get rid of all the secondary things and be able to identify what is really at the heart of what the author, the biblical author, is trying to say. Okay, so it begins with subject and verb. And I trust you guys still remember this even though it's full of cobwebs in the back of your memories. Subject and verb is, the subject is the person or thing being talked about or described, and the verb is the action. Okay. Now, sometimes the subject and verb can already stand by themselves. Josh ate, you smell, she smiled. In fact, when it comes to commands or instructions, even just a verb can convey a complete thought because the subject is implied. Like, if I tell herbs, stand, or please stand, right? There's no subject actually, right? But what I'm really saying is, you herbs, please stand. So the verb is so important. So subject and verb. But many verbs cannot really stand by themselves, and they require either a direct object, predicate noun, or predicate adjective. You don't have to remember these terms, by the way. Just understand the concept. Okay, and if you can kind of reach the point where you have this intuitive sense of what's going on, then forget the terms. Okay, so the direct object, except this, object. So subject, verb, object. Those three terms, please always remember. But, okay, the direct object is the person or thing acted upon. Okay, and it's used with action verbs. Caris kicked the ball. So here you have the subject, Caris, what she did, kicked, and then direct object, the ball. She kicked the ball. Okay. You can also have a predicate noun, and this happens with being verbs like am, is, was, will be, become. Right? So they are friends. This is a predicate noun. Okay, they are friends. A predicate adjective would be Carlos was hungry. Okay. I don't think I was thinking of your dad, right? But that was just a random name. Carlos was hungry. That's a predicate adjective. So, in summary, ito lang yung kailangan nyo maalala. Any of the following combinations can convey a complete thought. Okay, subject or verb. When the verb makes sense by itself, again, like Quito, Quito sees, or Luigi eats. That makes sense already. Uh, Otherwise, you need a subject plus verb plus direct object if you're using a verb of action, a verb that's doing something. If it's a verb of being, meaning am, is, was, will be, etc., you need either a predicate noun or a predicate adjective. And so, at most, this is telling you, at most, the main idea is captured in 3 words. Normally. At most. Sometimes it can be 1 word. Run, right? And that's the main idea. But it's usually 3 words. Now, I was thinking about whether to tell you about the exception to this. I might as well. You maybe don't have to remember it, but just in case you do and just in case it's helpful, the exception to this is helping verbs. Because, for example, Paul says in his letter, I want you to know that, etc., etc. Grammatically, or technically, by these rules, the main idea is I want. But then if you realize that want is just a helping verb, know is really what carries the force of what Paul's getting at. So I want you to know is really the complete thought. Okay, so that's the exception to this rule. But generally, the main idea is very brief, very concise. Now, many sentences in Scripture are compound sentences, okay, which means there's an and, but, or. So, Joseph runs and plays soccer. Okay. There are other examples. You will pass or you will fail. Joel was angry, Sheila was afraid, and Karen was shaken. Okay, now, why are these important? Because you will have more than one main idea. So, I laughed, Terry cried. Those are 2 main ideas. And in Scripture, you have many compound sentences. Okay, so, in fact, sometimes, especially in Paul's letters, and I think we'll see some in Titus, our English translations, to make it more readable, separate Paul's long sentences into several sentences. And so that's why often we have sentences beginning with and or but. A lot of the time in the Greek, it's actually not a period before the end or but like a comma or a semicolon. But our English translations put a period just to kind of keep us sane. Because we're not used to really, really long run-on sentences. Ayun. So, keep that in mind, compound thoughts. Compound sentences have more than one main idea. Okay, let's talk about modifiers. And again, you don't have to memorize these terms, but just be aware of them. Because the only at this level, you just need to identify that it's a modifier. You don't have to know what kind of modifier it is. Why do you need to know that? It's because you rule it out, and I'll explain what that means later. No? Again, the goal is always find the main idea. Find the main idea. And so you only do that by process of elimination. So if you look at something, oh, this is a modifier, scratch it out. And you go through the whole thing. No? So let's look at some of these, just to give you an idea. An adjective is a word describing a noun. So, I like Korean food. What kind of food? Korean. An adverb describes a verb. Work intelligently. Work in what way? Intelligently. An adverbial conjunction is a word that connects a sentence logically to other sentences. So, therefore, continue to do well. Continue to do well could stand by itself. Why is the therefore there? It's there to point you back to the previous sentence. So, for example, Christ died for us. Therefore, continue to do well. Therefore is actually modifying died. It's giving the reason or the um, was it the deduction or the application of dying. So it's adverbial. So that's why it's called adverbial conjunction. Great indeed is the mystery of godliness. So all of these and some more that I've listed down for you here point back to a previous sentence. These are modifiers, so you scratch them out when you're looking for the main idea. Then you have infinitives, which is the word to plus the verb. To dance, to reconcile. You have participles, which usually end with ing, running, dancing, but they can also end with ed or en, like fried chicken. Okay, half-eaten sandwich. What kind of sandwich? Half-eaten. You have direct address. It names a person or persons by name. So these are modifiers, not part of the main idea. So Rebecca, math isn't that hard. Or, don't give up, my friends. So the main idea is just don't give up. And then the direct address is a modifier. You have appositional phrases, which is a group of words that is identical to a person or thing. Stephen, who is, in parentheses, who is Jamie's dad, is coming. Those are also modifiers. Prepositional phrases highlights a relationship that may be physical, temporal, or a bit more abstract. For example, Timmy went outside the house. And here are a list of many other prepositions, but you know this intuitively, so don't be overwhelmed. Causal clauses show the cause of something. I left the theater because I felt sick. Since he chose to stay, he has to help fix up. And then you have comparative phrases or clauses. Quack like a duck. So the main idea is just quack. And so if you rule this out, like a duck, oh, that's a comparative phrase, then you rule it out, you're left with the main idea, quack. So and then you have contrasting phrases and clauses. Concessional clause, even if, although, right? So I'm completely full even if I didn't eat much. And you know that Paul likes to use even if and although a lot, right? So this is something you wanna be aware of. You have conditional clauses, if, unless. So if a phrase starts with if or unless, that's a modifier, not the main idea. Infinitive clauses, yeah, to save sinners, to throw off his rider. Participle clause, the participle version, waving his arms, shrugging his shoulders. You have a purpose clause. God saved us so that we would glorify Him. So that is the purpose. We would glorify Him. And that's not the main idea. Relative clause is clauses, a group of words that begin with who, which, that, where, when, whom, whose. And here are some examples. Bobby, who is Lisa's dad, is at work. I returned the gift that I bought from the store. So it's clarifying, okay, Bobby, something about Bobby. Bobby is Lisa's dad. What kind of gift or which gift? The one that I bought from the store. My hope is in heaven. Which heaven are you talking about? The one where God is. So that's what relative clauses do. You have result clause, which express the result of a certain action. So I sang so loudly that my voice gave out. The pastor pleaded so earnestly that the whole congregation wept. It's not talking about why he pleaded so earnestly, right? It's just the result, not the purpose. Okay, so that's some basic English grammar, and I know that was a lot, but trust me, that was that was as simple as I could make it. Okay, and again, you don't have to remember the terms, just be aware of them. And why do you need to know that? Again, because we need to find the main idea. So, finding the main idea is key to proper interpretation. And here's how you do it. It's a very complicated process where you identify all the modifiers in the sentence, you eliminate them, and you're done. So, why did we spend so much time talking about modifiers? It's so that you can scratch them out. No? Because the only way to find the main idea of a sentence is to eliminate everything else. And then you have it. So let's do an exercise, or let me show you an example from Ephesians 2, 1 to 3. You're familiar with this, I trust? And you were dead in trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath like the rest of mankind. And if I recall, this sentence in the Greek actually runs all the way to verse 10. It doesn't actually end in verse 3, but let's work with the English version. No? So here's a list of parts to rule out and why. So I think this would be worth doing just to kind of help you simmer a little bit more in the different kinds of modifiers. So again, I'm not saying you have to remember what these are to be able to identify what kind of modifiers. But hopefully this just helps you kind of, this gives us more time with modifiers to help us get a grip on it. And is an adverbial conjunction. Because it's talking about it's connecting the present sentence with what comes before. In trespasses and sins, well, you have a preposition, in, so this is a prepositional phrase. In which you once walked, also a prepositional phrase. Following the course of this world, this is a participle, so that's a participle clause. Following the prince of the power of the air, same thing. The spirit that is now at work. Apposition. The prince, which prince? The one, the spirit that is now at work. Then in the sons of disobedience, prepositional phrase, among whom, etc. Prepositions, preposition, participle. It's a prepositional relative clause that connects to here. It actually connects all the way back here. Among whom we lived and were children of wrath. Anyway, but so it connects back here. Okay. By nature, preposition, like the rest of mankind, preposition. And so once you get the hang of this, it's very fast. So imagine taking a pen and striking out all the modifiers in the passage, and here's what it would look like. And obviously, there's very little left, just 3 words, you were dead. And that's the main idea of the sentence. Okay. So, it's a very simple process. The only challenge is being able to identify the modifiers. Okay. Any questions? None. Okay, so let's go to an exercise.
How do you combat the fear of erasing the biblical words?
Okay. Well, yeah. Print it out or do it on Microsoft Word. Syempre not in your personal Bible, di ba?
Study Bible.
MacArthur Study Bible. No? Grabe. Nako, pag nakita yan ng liligawan mo, wala na. Yeah. Don't use your Bibles. No, print it out on a piece of paper or something. But in fact, let me tell you, it doesn't take a long time until you can do this just by sight. You just read the sentence, immediately you know what the main idea is. After just a few, I would say maybe hours of practice, madali na to. You don't even have to go through all this scratching out stuff. This is just to start with. So be encouraged. Okay, let's do an exercise. Let's find the main idea to some passages in Titus. I will open up my Logos and If you want, you can turn to your Bibles, but I'll have the text open here out in front of you. So let's do 2 paragraphs from the book of Titus.
Lord. He's coming.
He's coming.
Oh, what's this? It's hanging like an
We're just a question pala about the logos.
Yes.
On my phone, I can get ASB, ESB, KJV, all these things. Sa laptop, hindi siya free. Parang I was looking for may bayad. But on the phone, I don't know, and I have the same account naman. I don't know. If you know, if you would know.
I don't know why. So
yung
the
phone app sa
Yes.
so I thought that if anything you could access on the phone, you could access no, pero I guess that goes only for purchased things. But I guess certain free stuff is only on the app. Siguro incentive sa mga tao na ganun. Okay, Titus 1. Right, and then let's look at verses 5 to 9, which we have here. So I'll just copy this and then paste it onto Microsoft Word.
Mali yung pinili mo, brother. Husband of one wife, you may need you.
ICGCs yan. This is a test.
A good test.
A good test.
RGC message.
Okay, so let's go through this. No, there's a way to close this. Okay. This is why I left you in Crete. Is this a modifier? Is there a modifier here?
This is why.
I think this is
No, this is what I left you in Crete.
I left you.
No,
Which one? Which
The whole.
the whole thing is a modifier.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll strap. Oops.
Because it's giving context.
I was thinking the meaning is I left you in Crete.
Then
And then this is. And then this is why.
so sige, since we're not sure, let's just move on. So anything that we can't agree on, we'll skip muna. So that you might put what remained into order. These are several layers of modifiers, right? You have a purpose clause, you have a relative clause, you have a prepositional phrase, and so we just strike that all out. Wala bang hotkey for strike through? Wala na. For Microsoft Word. It's okay. And appoint elders in every town. How about and appoint elders? Is this a modifier?
The end itself, the end is a modifier.
Okay, but it could be part of a compound idea, right? What do you guys think?
Kasi part siya ng so that you end on
Yes, exactly. So
it's still part of what he's so that and then
yeah, so it's still part of the so that. This is why so that you might put something and the point elders. So that's also a modifier.
Usually they put like dash, di ba dapat parang after a sentence.
Dash after a sentence. Sometimes, I wouldn't say usually.
it depends on you.
In every town, obviously a prepositional phrase. How about as I directed you?
Diba as is preposition?
Yeah.
Yes.
So as I directed you is
Preposition.
Okay, so it's a modifier. Ayun. Yes,
Oh,
mabasa.
nice.
How about if anyone is above reproach?
yeah, that's about modifier.
How come? If, yes. So you don't have to remember the name, right? But it's if is obviously it's not a main idea.
The main idea.
The husband of one wife, ito ba yun?
Ano yun? Class dismissed.
Class dismissed.
You see what you want.
found it.
You see what you want to see.
And this is why we're having the workshop,
Thank
guys.
you. We are just the right guy to do it.
We have to fight that ICGesis. So, okay, let me help you guys overcome the bias. This is not the main idea.
Backspace na backspace.
It's not Still God's word.
Still God's word. Amen. Amen.
Not the main idea.
Yes, still God's word. Why is it not the main idea?
It's
If anyone.
If. Yeah, it's
Part of
still
the
part
if.
of the
Part of
if,
the if,
right?
yeah.
Oh,
So, if, and this is also still part of the if,
children are believers.
and
And not the
this is still part of the if.
Until insubverted.
There you go.
All the way there.
For,
Or unoverseen.
4 is ano, di ba?
okay, so by the way, let's stop there first because there are two levels of finding the main idea. Finding the main idea of a sentence and then finding the main idea of a paragraph. Okay, so let's stop here first, then I'll talk to you about finding the main idea of the paragraph. Okay, so there's the sentence, verses 5 and 6. And this is what's left. This is why I left you in Crete.
You think cut
So I-
this is why?
Baka I
But
left
this is
you.
why.
Oh, so I left you in Crete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
I left you.
I left you in Crete. This is why kasi
Oh,
it's the whole reason the strike.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Pero,
Or di ba?
you don't
Interesting.
need the increase.
I left.
If you're poor, basically.
Yeah, kasi
This
So,
is why.
oh,
I was thinking the
That's
subject
okay.
was I, or right now.
I
and
left.
The verb is left.
I left.
I
You is
left
the object.
you.
And then you were in Crete.
So,
Or I
okay.
left you where?
So, in Crete is a prepositional phrase.
Bakit?
So,
Yeah.
strike that out and this is what you're left with. So, this is ito yung medyo mahirap, no?
Yeah.
Is it I left you or this is
Or
why?
this is why. Pwede din. This is the subject. Tapos is then the being. And then is the why.
Okay.
O pwede this is why.
This is why or I left you.
I vote this.
This is why I
It might be this is why kasi you're explaining
Yeah.
the whole
This
this
is
is
why.
why. And that's what we
Okay. So, so this whole thing is the main idea. And let me
Oh.
explain why.
Oh.
I left you.
So, this is, and then you have this phrase. Think of this as in parentheses here. Why I left you. This is one thing. This is blank. So predicative. This is think of this as a thing. The reason why Paul left Titus. So this is predicative noun. Predicate nominative is the term. It's nominative is not a noun. It's a group of words that function as a noun. Okay, so this whole thing is the main idea. Okay, so again, there are subtleties to this, but still, you kind of see that even if, let's say, you were studying your Bible and you got down to this, and you really couldn't figure out among these 6 words left, which one is really the main idea, you're still on pretty good ground because you've ruled out a whole big, the rest of the whole big sentence, right? Okay, so that's the main idea of the sentence. Let's now try to find the main idea of the paragraph. So how do you do that? You just get all the main ideas of the sentence. you find the main sentence of the paragraph, and then you get the main idea of that main sentence. How do you know which one is the main sentence? Well, you look at the sentence. If the sentence is modifying another sentence, then it's not the main idea. So, how about this one at the beginning of verse 7? For an overseer as God's steward must be above reproach. This is not the main sentence in the paragraph because it's giving a reason. Right? So it's not the main sentence. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or a drunkard, etc. And that runs up until the end of verse 8. Okay. This is not the main sentence. Why? Because it's just explaining 7, the first sentence here in verse 7. The same thing could be said as this one. It's just explaining, again, this one, above reproach.
So the main sentence is,
This is why it's here.
So again, this is both the main idea of the first sentence and the main idea of the paragraph. So if you were teaching this, let's say you were teaching this whole paragraph. Okay, what is Titus 1, 5 to 9 about? It's about why Paul left Titus in Crete. Okay, we would think about, oh, that's the text about qualifications for overseers. Okay, yes, but that's not the main idea. So we do get qualifications for overseers, and it's a very prominent idea because that's why Paul left Titus in Crete. But the main idea is, as I said, that one. Okay, so it helps give us a bit more grounding. Now, if you skip this process or you were not aware of it, and you just kind of went with, oh, well, this is about the qualifications of an overseer, you wouldn't go far, hopefully too far, but you would miss, you would miss maybe the application or the context, and you would miss the special flavor of the text. Because there are other texts like 1 Timothy chapter 3 where Paul also talks about qualifications for elders. So how is that text different from this? And it's not just the items that Paul lists. It was written for a different purpose. No? And so we always want to honor that by looking for the authorial intent, the purpose for why the biblical writer wrote the passage. And the way to do that is to find the main idea. Okay, let's do this same thing with the next paragraph, verses 10 to 16.
By the way, the hotkey now is Alt H4.
Oh, let's try that. Alt H4. Nothing happened.
Oh, it's supposed to work. Alt H and 4.
Hold mo yung Alt.
Yeah, hold then. Alt then H and 4.
Yeah. Wala.
Wala?
Alt brings up these
Yep.
weird things.
Supposed to bring it up and then supposed to also
It's okay.
Oh.
But thank you for looking at
It
that.
works, it works.
Appreciate it.
It does.
It works?
Yeah, it works.
Okay.
H.
Huh. And we both have ThinkPads. So why doesn't it work?
Hold mo yung Alt tsaka H before you press forward.
Yeah. O sige, try that again. Hold Alt H4.
Alt H.
Alt and H lang naka-hold. Tapos saka mo tutulog ng forward.
Okay. I'll try that
Alt
again.
H. And then last
Alt
one.
H4.
Really doesn't
What?
like it. I wonder why.
Technology doesn't like me. It's okay, bro. It's okay. It's okay. Thank you. I don't want to get stuck, troubleshooting.
We have
Um,
half IT in the
Yeah, appreciate it though.
Ayaw na mag-cross out.
Yun pala yun.
Galing daw kasing TMS yung term.
Oo nga, masyadong sanctified. Submit. Sige, let's run through this. All these sentences. Here's what we actually do first. Let's find the main sentence first. No, so we don't have to go through all the sentences finding the main idea of each one. Let's find the main sentence. Okay, so let's read the whole thing. For there are many who are insubordinate, empty talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision party. They must be silenced, since they are upsetting whole families by teaching for shameful gain what they ought not to teach. One of the Cretans, a prophet of their own, said, Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. This testimony is true. Therefore rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, not devoting themselves to Jewish myths and the commands of people who turn away from the truth. To the pure, all things are pure, but to the defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure. But both their minds, and their consciences are defiled. They profess to know God, but they deny Him by their works. They are detestable, disobedient, unfit for any good work. Okay, so which one here do you think is the main sentence?
Verse 13b. I think it's the
Therefore rebuke them sharply. Interesting. Do we agree? Any other opinions?
They must be silent.
Here, verse 11.
Yeah.
They must be silenced. It's a good option. Do we agree? Who agrees with that? They must be silenced. Wala. Okay. How about the others?
10.
10. Which one? Which part?
There are men.
Oh, well, sabagay, it's all one sentence naman. Ano? Yeah, so, okay, so the sentence in verse 10. Does anyone agree with that? Wala. Oh, wow, the floor is really divided. Okay, how about the others?
Always liars. Evil beasts.
Cretans are cringe.
So, it can be challenging, no? And sometimes, modifying sentence can be indicated by a conjunction, therefore, or it can be just a logical connection. Okay, so I'll show you a little trick, and we'll talk about this a lot more when I think next session we talk about diagramming. But I'll show you a little trick that will just help you in situations like this, where just by looking at the text in a normal format, you kind of have trouble figuring out what the main idea is. So you separate the sentences. Okay, and then the idea is to indent anything that modifies something else. So I'll show you. Let's start from the bottom. They profess to know God. Is this explaining or clarifying any previous sentence?
Yes.
Yes.
Which one?
The Cretan.
Cretans.
Verse
Yeah.
12.
Verse 12. Well, I would disagree because
I would say
this
verse
here.
14 is
Yeah.
closer.
Undefiled and unbelieving.
Because it's basically a description of the Cretans.
15 actually could be
Yeah,
considered
that's
as
true.
explaining
I'm not sure which
15
verse.
for the
Well,
defiled.
Yeah, at the very least, it's modifying 15, right? So, but to the defiled and unbelieving. By the way, we'll do that. So, because this is a compound sentence, do you recognize it? To the pure, all things are pure, but to the defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure. Yeah, so you have This is a second layer compound sentence. Uh, so this is talking about the defiled, right? So it's modifying this. How about this? Is verse 15 modifying anything?
No. At the first
Not,
part? No.
not directly. Okay. So we'll leave that. And then how about this one? Therefore rebuke them sharply.
Yes.
What's it modifying?
It's like a reaction to the prophet.
Or it's I think it's a logical conclusion
Yeah.
of upstairs about the
Like,
Which
it's
verse?
a reaction to the testimony, I guess.
oh, this testimony is true, therefore.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I would agree. There. How about this? Is this sentence modifying anything?
Yes.
It's
Which one?
describing
The Cretans are always liars.
Okay, so it's modifying verse 12.
Ah, okay.
Is this modifying anything?
One of the Cretans. No, actually.
Well, not grammatically, but remember logically.
Mm.
Is it explaining anything?
Yeah. Yes.
What's it explaining?
The
It's
insubordinate.
either 10 or 11.
Yeah.
10 or 11? Yeah. So,
No, 11 refers to 10. So,
So-
parang, I think 12 refers to 10.
so 12 refers to insubordinate, is what you're saying. Okay.
Empty talkers.
All right. So, are you saying 11 also refers back to 10?
Yeah.
Yes.
Kasi 11 is it's like, what do you do with those in verse 10?
What do you do with those in verse 10, with the insubordinate?
Mm.
So, okay, I want to talk about this a bit more because Daniel said this is the main idea. And it's I understand why this looks like a main idea. And verse 10 could also look like a main idea, right? So, you're arguing that verse 11 is actually not the main idea because what's it doing to verse 10?
Yeah.
In your view,
Yeah. Based on
what's
how
it doing?
Kasi parang in verse 10,
Mhm.
so you're basically setting up the subject. And then verse 11 is the action to the subject.
Mm. Okay, so if I interpret correctly, it's like how do you respond to the action? Okay, so I would agree actually, kasi this is, if you imagine inserting the word therefore, it makes perfect sense. There are many who are these kinds of people, therefore they must be silenced. And so that's you see the logic there. It's not explicit, but you can kind of just read it into there. So that's modifying. I'm not adding anything. Delete recording.
Suggesting,
Oh boy. Okay, now what do we do with this? Because this seems to stand on its own, and grammatically it does. It stands on its own. But logically, I would argue it's explaining
It's the
why
con-
they must be silenced.
It's the contrast to what they are.
So, I know, they must be silenced because to the pure all things are pure, but to the defiled and unbelieving nothing is pure. And so you're left with this being the main sentence. Now, let's start getting rid of the modifiers. Okay. What's someone point out the modifier to scratch out?
who are insubordinate.
Who are insubordinate? It's a relative clause.
I don't know. Should it be part of the there are
All up to deceivers.
or-
Yung
Sorry.
anong
Ah,
deceivers.
Okay. Yeah.
And then,
So, there are many.
There are many who are, I think, parang it sounds like, ano eh.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Otherwise, there are many.
There are many.
There are many.
Diba?
A lot.
Very many what
Isn't
if
that nice?
doesn't answer the question.
Okay, so you wanna take this out first kasi hindi pa tayo agreed yan. Sige. How about, is there anything else?
Especially those of us.
Okay, we'll get rid of that because it's an adverbial phrase. No, it's
Referring to the many.
there are certain kinds of people,
Or-
especially these kinds of people. For is an adverbial conjunction, so we can get rid of
From the
that.
previous.
So there are many who are insubordinate. Sige, we don't have to, wag na tayong mag-argue, no, kung may tatanggalin pa tayo dito. Basta yun na yung thought, di ba? So good job, guys. Well, hindi naman to exam or what, di ba? You just want to get the idea. So ito na yun. This is the main idea of the whole paragraph. So why was Titus 10 to 16 written? Because there are these kinds of people. And you have to know how to deal with them. O, diba? It's very simple. Let's read the whole paragraph again just to help you see. Sana ma-appreciate nyo the value of doing this, because let's read the paragraph again and you'll see how easy it is to lose track of the main idea. No? For there are many who are insubordinate, empty talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision party. They must be silenced, since they are upsetting whole families by teaching for shameful gain what they ought not to teach. One of the Cretans, a prophet of their own, said, Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. Doon pa lang, sino yung prophet na to? Tapos mag-research ka, buong araw ka na mag-research, sino yung prophet na to? Tsaka bakit prophet? Bakit may prophet ba sa ibang kultura na hindi Jewish? Ganun. And you can run down that rabbit hole. This testimony is true. Therefore, rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, not devoting themselves to Jewish myths and the commands of people who turn away from the truth. Ano tong Jewish myths na to? And you know, these people who turn away from the truth. And so is Paul saying that Gentile cultures are better than the Jewish culture? Kasi, you know, and I can imagine biblical scholars writing a whole article on Paul and how he favored Gentile cultures because he favored Gentile cultures over Jewish culture, because here you have him quoting a Cretan poet as if he were a prophet, which talks about general revelation, you know, and how God speaks to people outside of Scripture, you know, and just going all over the place. Sige, let's go on, no? To the pure, all things are pure. What does that mean? But to the defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure. But both their minds and their consciences are defiled. They profess to know God, but they deny Him by their works. They are detestable, disobedient, unfit for any good work. So, is this a text about genuine salvation versus false conversion? You could turn it into that, into a sermon about that. You see what I mean? How if you don't go through the discipline of finding the main idea, you can go down so many rabbit holes when you're interpreting a text. But if you find the main idea, which as we determined is there are many who are insubordinate, then that's what the text is about. There is a certain kind of people who you will find in the church. And there's a certain way to deal with them. There's a certain way to identify them and to deal with them. And that's what this text is about. In fact, if you trace this back to the previous paragraph, because again, this is an adverbial conjunction, what verb is it modifying? Yes. Thank you.
Let's go. So good. That's so good.
Heavenly rapture, right?
Okay, I have a question now.
Yes,
Since
yes.
I was able to ask dun sa first.
Oh,
So
sige.
you're
Oh, sorry, can you hold on to that thought
sige.
first? I'll just finish this thought here. So for is an adverbial conjunction. It's reaching back to a previous verb, which reaches back to here. Why did Paul leave Titus in Crete? Because there are a certain kind of people that he has to deal with.
This verb.
Yeah. So, diba? Suddenly it's simpler, right? You have all these details that are important and you need to look into when you're studying. But if you have 2 hours to prepare for a teaching, let's say it's just a 10-minute exhortation, right? And you have 2 hours to prepare, you already know exactly what to major on. And if you never get to research about Cretans and who is this prophet and what are Jewish myths, that's fine, you'll get by. Because you have the main idea. And you'll be faithful to the text with the time that the Lord has given you. Okay, so Luigi?
Dun sa 5 to 9, sa chapter 1.
Yes.
So he says, this is why I left you in Crete, blah, 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 blah. If the order was reversed, so what remain in the order and then common, this is why I left you in Crete, would that change in the essence of the 5 to 9?
Well, so what you're really asking is,
Yeah.
not that just that the words would be rearranged, but if he reworded it. Put what remains into order or what remained into order, and this is why I left you in Crete. Sige, let's try that. So, tanggalin na natin to. Put what remained into order, and this is, or let's say, which is why I left you in Crete. Let's say he phrased it that way. What would be the main idea? Let's see if anyone can find it without doing the cross out thing. Okay, never mind. Let's do the cross out thing. I left you. I left you. Well, I left you is part of what is now a relative clause, which is a modifier. So this whole thing is now a modifier if you reword it. So grammar is important. This is technically, it's a modifier. It's a prepositional phrase. But you could argue, well, put what remained just, doesn't really make a lot of practical sense without this. So fine, if you wanna include that, go right on ahead. So this is the main idea. Put what remained into order. If it were worded this way.
So even this is a Filipino, right? We can, the sentences or swap, all of that. So things like that. What's the matter?
Yeah, diba in English, word order is a bit more important, right? But let's say if it's purely just a rearrangement, what if Paul said, in order that you might put what remained into order, colon, this is why I left you in Crete, then he didn't really change the grammar. He just rearranged it. So, ibang case yun. You would still end up with this being the main thing. Okay, any questions?
Are there times like the main idea is in the middle of a paragraph? Kasi parang I'm noticing na it's always at the first sentence. You just have to parang like take away yung mga modifiers sa first sentence to find the main idea.
I think there are, but it's unusual. Kasi think about how you would have to phrase things to do that. You'd have to start with a lot of modifiers, which is, it sounds very awkward to do, like running for 2 hours, jumping over a hill, greeting all the passers-by. In order to please her friend, Monica went to the mall. Right? The main idea is Monica went to the mall, but that's like nobody really talks that way.
Master Yoda.
Master Yoda, well, you know. Okay, I defer to Master Yoda.
I apologize for this, brother.
Yeah, so it's possible, and it does happen, but it's quite unusual. Normally, nasa malapit sa beginning, which gives you another clue. And thank you for asking that question, because that's actually, I should include that in the material. Na it's usually at the start of a paragraph. Okay, so we have just a bit of time left, and I want to take you guys through summarizing. We actually have a lot to cover. Let's see.
You can do it.
So we want to learn how to summarize paragraphs, and we want to learn how to create an outline. So let's do it this way. So if we go back to verses 10 to 16, there you go. Okay, so you now have the main. Okay, you have the main idea of the paragraph. There are many who are insubordinate. Alright, so that's the main idea. And then you look at all the other sentences, and that's when you look for. You don't have to do this step, but it might be helpful if you have the time. Find the main idea for all the other sentences. But if you don't have time for that, you'll have to do this a bit intuitively, which is figure out how all the sentences relate to the main idea. Okay, so they must be silenced. Let's call this the response. The response to the main idea. And then this is modifying this. You have to figure that out. Then it's interesting, you have two instructions. They must be silenced, rebuke them sharply. Grammatically, this is modifying this. Logically though, it's really parallel to this. So sometimes, I think context trumps something like this. And so, this is still a response to the kind of there are certain people in the church, so they must be silenced, they must be rebuked sharply.
Would it be possible then
Yeah.
that verse 12 is actually at the same level as 11, because the one of the pretense could be modifying the they up there rather than the they on 11, even though technically they're the same. For example.
Yeah, you could make that case. So we could do it that way. And so this is where you kind of have to argue from context, especially when there's not a conjunction that really ties it very kind of explicitly. You have to argue from context. And so you can come to different conclusions, like Drox just did. Yeah. So this is giving a response to the main idea. This is explaining in greater detail the main idea. This is also giving another response. And again, this is explaining. So if you wanted to represent this visually another way, you could do it that way. And so response, explanation, response, explanation. Not of the response, but of the kind of people who there are. And in fact, this is how I would preach it. I would preach it this way. How to recognize these troublemakers and how to deal with these troublemakers. But easy 2-point outline. So that's, how would you summarize this then? How would you summarize the paragraph in one sentence? Because if you go back to our method, Ay na pala. If you go back to so let's say we're doing level 2. We need to write a one-sentence summary of every chapter and paragraph. So we won't do the summary of every chapter. Let's just practice the paragraph. How would you summarize it in one sentence? So you start with the main idea. There are troublemakers. And then what do you add to that summary?
What to do with it?
Okay, and so how would you so there are troublemakers. Let's put that up here. Summary. There are troublemakers.
I would put above that, I left, this is why I left you. There are troublemakers.
Oh, but we're not writing from Paul's perspective. We're just writing kind of like a synopsis of the paragraph. Think of the thing at the back of. You probably still remember DVD jackets, right? So the thing at the back of what the movie is, right? So Alan Ripley is on board an alien spaceship when this happens. You know, this song. So to save time, because I do want to take you to creating an outline. There are troublemakers who must be dealt with. I'll put it this way. So I think that this identified, just this one word, summarize verses 10, 11, 12, 15, and 16. And the words dealt with decisively summarizes 11 and this part, 13 and 14. So see, this whole thing, suddenly if someone asks you, your cell servant asks you, okay, what's Titus 10 to 16 about? There are troublemakers in the church who must be identified and decisively dealt with. Period. So it's very simple. And then, it's so easy to keep in mind when you're preaching now, when you're developing your exhortation or your lesson, everything you say has to relate to that. If you start making an application that has nothing to do with this, that's not necessarily wrong. You just maybe should think twice about doing that, because you're taking an extra step away from the original intent of the text. Okay? All right. So, any questions before we go to? Yeah.
Where would I see the dealt with, but where would we draw the identified?
Oh yeah, here. He's talking about what kind of people they are.
Because he's describing them, therefore it's draw identification.
Yeah, and you have to wonder, why is he going through the trouble of describing them? What's the point? He wants Titus to be able to know what kind of people they are, to identify them. So, ganun. Alright. Lastly, let's talk about creating an outline, which is the final step of getting the context. Okay, so in level 2, review the book outline suggested by your introductory reading. Think about if it still makes sense after you've read the book several times and gone through all these different processes of summarizing, thinking through these things. Does the suggested purpose of the outline of the book still make sense? And is there anything you would change? So here's what we'll do. Let's compare MacArthur's Quick Reference Guide, his outline there, with a commentary by a different scholar. And let me show you how different they are, or at what points they are similar and at what points they're different. Okay, there. Then for MacArthur's, okay, now for level 2, you don't have to create your own outline. You just get outlines that make sense to you and then work with those. You're still reaching your own conclusions because you have to evaluate those outlines. And you're not just copying and pasting. Okay? So let's compare these two. First of all, how are they similar? Nababasa nyo ba? Kaya ba? Well, they both have verses 1, chapter 1, 1 to 4. They're both kind of an opening section, so that they agree on that.
5 to 16 is instructions.
Yeah.
Is it possible to make the right one a little bigger?
The right one a little bigger. Sure.
Instructions to titles.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make it all fit kasi.
Possible to hide the big.
Yeah.
Oh,
Logos pa, syempre.
yes.
Someone's earning some royalties.
I wish.
Download using my link here.
Enter the code, Pastor Keith.
Yun. There's an idea.
Kito at
I might as well be earning from this. Right?
Oh, essentials for evangelism. Oh.
And this is interesting, right? It's,
It's interesting.
why does MacArthur put it that way? Essentials for evangelism, for effective evangelism. So something to think about is that, is that a bit too? Do I agree with that? Is that a bit too kind of he kind of focused too narrowly on one thing? Maybe, or maybe he's seeing something I'm not. That if you actually study Titus, you'd realize maybe, oh, this whole thing is about evangelism. Maybe. MacArthur will do that sometimes. It's like, did he like, did he make this wacky conclusion, or does he see something I don't? Because this is MacArthur, he might be seeing something
May
I'm not
pinagdadaanan
seeing.
siya nung binasa niya tayo.
Oh, diba?
Very specific.
Very specific. Maybe he was trying to build an evangelistic ministries church or whatever, but probably not naman. He's a better expositor than that. But it's interesting, no? So he focuses on that.
Versus instructions and
The-
titles.
And someone, it's okay, we're almost done. Someone pointed out that verses 5 to 16, chapter 1, they're both treated as units. This is a bit different. Although it's interesting, this outline groups these two together. And yet, this 2, 1 to 15 is treated as a unit. 3, 1 to 11 is also... hindi, ito, hiniwalay pa, further.
Yeah. May 9 to 11.
Oo. So 3, 1 to 8 and then 3, 9 to 11. Interesting. And then 3, 12 to 14 treated as also a separate unit.
That's interesting phrase. Disciplining the opponents in the church.
Oo.
This is MacArthur's
Yeah, something to look into, di ba? If you're studying the text. And then finally, 3:15, also treated separately. So here's the thing. If you have 2 or 3 good commentators and they agree on the kind of the cuts, you should probably keep those cuts and not change them too much, unless you're really convinced otherwise, which is, again, you have to reach your own conclusions. So what you're really looking at is, you don't have to worry about chapter 1, 1 to 4. You don't have to worry about 3:12 to 14 and 3:15. The outlines agree on that. And you don't even have to worry too much about 1:5 to 16 as a unit or 2:1 to 15 as a unit. You do have to think about, okay, do I agree with MacArthur that 3:1 to 11 is one thing? Or do I further divide that, as Towner does, into 3:1 to 8 and 3:9 to 11? So now you just kind of save yourself some trouble and just focus on the differences. And now you have to figure out, why do they differ and which one do I agree with? Or do I agree with neither and I have my own conclusion? Then you come up with your own outline. Okay, so that's how you would do it if you're not creating your own from scratch. Any questions? Pretty straightforward, no? Creating an outline. But only do this after you've done your own observing of the book. This is the last step before you get into your passage. Why is this the last step? Because this is the fruit of all the reading, the marking, the summarizing the paragraphs, looking into the sections, summarizing the sections or the chapters. Because you can't come up with a reliable outline unless you've done all that and you have a really good sense of the book as a whole and where it goes, where it's flowing, and how it unpacks the message of the author. So the outline is kind of the crowning product of this whole process of studying the book on a kind of a broad level. And then you can get into studying your text because now you know where your text fits into the book as a whole. Where the tree is in the forest. Hindi lang siya tree na hindi mo alam kung nasan ka.